Welcome to This Week in Habsland. As usual, I am Jordan and I'm joined by my co-host Brian. And we are here every Monday to discuss all things Montreal Canadiens. As usual, you can find us on social media at Habsland Pod. Now, this is not our second episode of the season, and I did want to provide folks briefly before we get into all the sad stuff that we are going to be playing around a bit with our format this year. So for new listeners, or for old listeners, I should say, we are for now taking down the 3-period format and are simplifying things a little bit. So what Brian and I are going to be doing each episode from now on is we're going to have a 2-part episode. The first part, which we're calling our headlines, where we're going to talk about the most important storylines and moments of the past week. And then in our second part, we will have what I think was previously our second period, which is any type of wacky, zany format and discussion. This week, it'll be the hot take meter. So just wanted to let people know that what happened to the 3 stars of the week. We're kind of shifting that around so that we're able to be a little bit more flexible. So Brian, enough preamble. For people's record too, just to be clear, we are recording this Sunday around 2 p.m. So we do not have any updated medical information. Likely by the time you listen to this episode, you'll have that information on the Patrick Laine and David Reinbacher injuries. So we just wanted to put that little disclaimer out at the front. So Brian, we can hop right into part 1. I would ask how you're doing, but let's start off with the first headline of the week, which I know exactly where you're going to go with it. So lead us off.
Yeah, the first headline of the week, unfortunately, definitely not the headline we were hoping to kick this week off with, is injuries and the code. And we'll start with the injuries side. So 5 seconds into a game that doesn't matter, our young and promising defensive prospect, David Reinbacher, is hit after making a play off the opening faceoff. The hit was fine, but it did cause Reinbacher to fall awkwardly and to injure his left leg. He limped off the ice, putting no weight on the leg, and later left the arena on crutches, a brace on his left knee. Minutes later, Patrick Laine makes a tenacious attempt to split the defenders just inside the Leafs blue line, and Cedric Paré sticks out his leg and causes one of the dirtiest and most dangerous plays in hockey, the knee-on-knee collision. Laine's knee bent awfully, all of our collective stomachs dropped, and he was helped off the ice and through the tunnel with a great deal of anger. Now, was Paré's goal to injure Laine so terribly? Probably not, but that split-second action is something that you never do in hockey, and now an NHL star is hurt because a guy who will never play in the show made an awful decision. Patrick left the arena on crutches with a brace on his left knee. So, 2 crucially important Canadiens players with braces on their knees from injuries sustained in a preseason game that does not matter. It's hard to know in this moment where all of our anger should be directed. On the socials, I've seen some Habs fans hoping for a major injury to a Leafs star. I've seen some hoping for something awful to happen to Paré. I've even seen some wanting repercussions for the Leafs front office and Craig Berube for playing this perpetual AHLer in the preseason game. I don't think any of these are right. Certainly none of them are helpful. You know what I did? After far too much time dwelling on it and scrolling the awfulness that is Habs versus Leafs Twitter, I turned off the app, I closed my phone, I hugged my daughter, I ate my feelings, donuts, burgers, milkshakes, and although none of this changes what happened, at least I'm not inciting violence or hoping for harm to come to others. We have to be better. There's nothing any of us can do to help Patrick or David other than to be supportive of them through their rehab and to not wish for harm to come to others. That's all we can do. Trust in the medical staff to help them recover as soon as humanly possible and support them as good fans do. That's all we can really do. As for the injuries themselves, like you said, Jordan, we really don't know the prognoses yet, and so we won't attempt to speculate about timeline or anything like that. But again, just hoping for the best for our 2 young, promising players. I'll let you jump in now, Jordan, because after I want to talk about Arbor Jackie's actions and the code, but we should deliberate about the injuries themselves, the players, and everything else that's been going on a little bit first.
Yeah, so I appreciate the PSA. Let's focus on sending positivity towards our players and not vitriol towards anyone. So that just kind of, thank you for saying that. We want to always make sure we're positive on this podcast. I think people who've listened to us know that by now. So put that to the side. This was a preseason game in September. And Brian, from the Laine injury onwards, I did not sit down while watching this game at home. I was the entire first period. I was just pacing up and down. And then the Jackie stuff happens and I didn't know what to do. It was like I was having a tough time processing what exactly was happening. I think we all were We all had immediate flashbacks to Kirby Dach last season. We know all the injuries that this team has had for the past 3+ seasons, really. And I couldn't believe what was actually going down. I want to start maybe with Reinbacher, because like I get very worried when I see something that looks like a knee injury with very limited contact. Again, won't speculate on it, but the fact that he left in crutches as well doesn't bode well. And you just really got to feel for the kid who, I mean, he was trending certainly towards going to Laval, and that hopefully is still the case, but it was just really tough to see. He's had an up and down preseason, and we can get into that, but seeing him get hurt right off the bat is just like, you can feel the kind of the pressure on him. And then you move on to Laine. Like, man, this guy's had a tough journey back to the show. Like, he has gone through injuries, he has gone through the player assistance program, and he has come out on the other side. You can see in the past month or so, as he's made his way into Montreal, how he's really trying to embrace this fresh starts. A lot of times players talk about, oh, I need a fresh start. Oh, signing here or getting traded here. Like, yeah, this will help boost my career. It's much of the time it's nonsense. This one really felt, and still does feel, maybe not anymore, like Patrik Laine had another chance at kind of kickstarting and restarting his career after all the trials and tribulations he's gone through. And then to get hurt in an absolutely useless preseason game. And I definitely want to get into the whole AHL, NHL preseason nonsense. I really want to get into that. But the point is, he was playing in the game, he got injured in it, and like Mike Johnson said it really well on the TSN broadcast, the players know their body the best. Like, we're gonna sit around and we're gonna wait for the prognosis, but when you have a player react like that as they're going off the ice, you know it's not good. We're hoping that they both make full recoveries, but man, like, that is by far and away the most. This is probably, I'm trying to think now in real time, Brian, is this the most devastating game that the Montreal Canadiens have played since Kent Hughes and Jeff Gordon took over?
Since they took over, no question. Yeah, of course. Like, I was trying to think about the last time I felt this way, and there was the Chara hit into the stanchion on Pacioretty, where my stomach dropped like this. There was obviously the Kreider running Price in the playoffs, and there was Dach last season. But the thing about Dach last season was it wasn't a predatory hit. It was just a crappy occurrence. It was just something that went wrong. A hit was awkward. He was hit into the bench and his leg bent. And it's just one of those things, which that is what happened to Reinbacher. That's sort of a very similar thing, where it was just an awkward way to fall after a hit. But for it to be both Reinbacher and Laine in the same game, and for the Laine one to be incredibly questionable when you consider, maybe motive is the wrong word, because you're making split second decisions. So it certainly wasn't premeditated, but a knee-on-knee collision, as I said, to kick this whole thing off, is one of the worst and most dangerous things that can happen in hockey, and you never stick your leg out like that. And so there's also that feeling of, the Reinbacher one was crappy and awkward, and we hate losing him and it sucks. But on the Laine side, it's also that there's all this anger towards the player because of what an awful hit that was, and how it completely wasn't warranted and just should not have happened at all. So yeah, I think definitely since Team Hugo took over, this was the worst game by far. And I mean, to at the risk of sounding cheesy as hell, it's only up from here, we hope. How could it possibly get worse? And we have 2 games against Ottawa in the preseason left, and we all know how in the past few years they've put out goon squads. So I'm praying that they saw what happened and are not going to go headhunting, because that's the other thing too, Jordan. In this game, after these injuries occurred, there was still a great deal of headhunting. Elbows coming up to star players' heads from the Montreal Canadiens.
Yeah, let's get into that part a bit. Let's park the Jack Eye conversation for a few minutes.
Sure. Yes.
I want to talk about structurally how the NHL preseason has changed in the past 5 or so years, and how I really do think this is going to be a tipping point going forward. The NHL is like extremely slow with making changes. For some reason, they're the only organization, like they're the only league that has to wait until CBA to like flick their nose. So this is what's been happening. maybe this is a COVID thing. I don't remember it happening as much beforehand. But essentially what happens now in preseason, these players are taxed to the bone, not literally, I mean, in terms of physically, over the next 6 to 8 months, 9 months for the deep run teams. So what teams have, I think, initially smartly been doing is, and the Habs have done it so far, is Nick Suzuki, you're not going to travel for the preseason. You're going to stay home. You're going to play your home games. We're not going to make you travel. Now, of course, there's not much travel going on regardless. The Habs will usually go to Toronto. They'll go to Ottawa. That's usually about it. There might be an Atlantic Canada game. I don't even remember if they even go south of the border at any point in the last couple preseasons. Definitely not this preseason. So what happens is, and every team's doing this. I mean, look at the Toronto Maple Leafs on Thursday. They had basically everybody other than Matthews and Nyes, I believe, was essentially in that lineup because that game was in Toronto. Makes sense, right? Let's make sure we don't overtax our players too soon just yet. They're not playing in every preseason game. Sure. So what's happening now? We need to have 50, 60 guys at camp. You're seeing teams do split squad games all the time now, which I think is a real danger because we're getting these issues here where look at the lineup the Habs dressed on Thursday night. Like, let's look inward first. That was, other than maybe 5 or 6 players, the Laval Rocket for all intents and purposes, right? You had some guys there that you're like, okay, yeah, sure. Christian Dvorak will be on the team and, whoever else was there, like that. They'll make the team. There's about a half a dozen players. I think Armia was playing. That's about it. The rest of the team was in the AHL. It was Kidney, it was Mailloux, it was Sean Farrell, Owen Beck. Like, that's the lineup that they put out on the road. And then conversely, when Toronto came on Saturday night, obviously they didn't bring any of their guys. They left them at home. So this is starting off as like we want to make sure we don't tax our players too much. We need to make sure that they're rested by the time the preseason starts. And what's happening is you're getting these AHL versus NHL lineups. And you run into these issues where there are players who are, like, I don't want to call out reckless. I mean, it was reckless what Poirier did. I'll say that. Intent, I don't know, but it was reckless. You have to be in control of your own body. You just need to know what you're doing at all times. I am now at the point, like, so this is what's been happening. I think the inflection point is right now. And I think starting next year, like if I'm Jeff Gordon, Ken Hughes, Martin St. Louis, I say, first week of training camp, first week of preseason, Cole Caulfield, Yuri Slafkovsky, Mike Matheson, Nick Suzuki, Kirby Dach, Patrick Laine, Alex Newhook, Caden Gould, like none of you are playing. We're going to make this like the NFL where no one plays in the first preseason game or two. They're not doing anything until we see all the other teams make their first 30 cuts.
Right. Okay.
Because that's what's happening. The Habs made all their cuts Saturday night. So now who's left with the Habs is basically the Habs, right? There's a few extra players here and there. But it's
anybody who has a chance. It's not guys who are headhunting. It's not guys trying to make a name for themselves by just being physical. It's guys who have a chance at the lineup.
That's right. So that's what happens. I think that's what they have to do. You have to do it from now on. You want to have 6 preseason games, 8 preseason games? Sure. I'm not letting any of my good players play in the first week where you have some junior players, some guys who just came over from Europe, some guys who are career AHLers, some guys who are on PTOs. No, I'm not putting, not to like make this in like financial terms, but my first line that's worth $25 million on the ice against a bunch of randos who have no chance of being in the NHL. I'm not doing that anymore.
Right.
We now save. So for like this preseason, I wouldn't have played any of those guys. Like it's hindsight, obviously, but they're not playing those first 4 games. These last 2, sure. Play Slav and that first line, both games. Tuesday night, Saturday night against Ottawa. Sure. With the understanding, hopefully, that the Sens are in the same boat, where the Sens hopefully would cut their same group till 30. So then it's, okay, we get 2 good preseason games with mostly our full lineup. That's the proper dress rehearsal. I don't know if that's going to happen, but that's how I could envision it going forward. What do you think about that? Because that's all that was part of my like processing yesterday of like, we have to fix this. This is broken. You can't have this type of player injuring a star. And that's what Patrick Laine is. He's been a star and he was going to return to being a star, and he still will.
Yes.
But you can't have this happen. It's bullshit. You can't have it happen. So like, what are your thoughts on that and how like preseason has morphed over the years or anything along those lines?
Well, I'll start with the idea that Team Hugo could make that adjustment next year, and I think it's a smart one, Jordan. I think it's very astute to think that until these other teams have made their cuts, there's too much risk of injury, and there's no point getting used to a pace of game that's lesser than what you're going to be experiencing in the regular season anyway, other than conditioning and getting back into game shape. And yes, the pace is faster than in inter-squad games or intra-squad games, I guess I should say, in between players of the same organization. Of course, you're still upping your pace, but I think the risk of injury is too great. Another idea that I've seen is that you switch the AHL and NHL preseason timing. Have it a handful of days prior to the NHL preseason and have those games be a trial period for players who played in the AHL last year who could get bumped up. So no automatic entry into the NHL preseason for prospects, and maybe you could set I don't know, a pedigree line, like a threshold of like, okay, they were a first round pick, so they're allowed into the NHL preseason automatically, or whatever you want to set. But there has to be some way of, this is the trial period for the AHL, because look, Pare and a bunch of these other guys, Habs, Leafs, Sens, Golden Knights, it doesn't matter. There's a bunch of these teams with players who played in the preseason and have been playing and still will, who don't belong in the NHL, who either aren't ready yet or never will be. And so do the AHL preseason first, see that they don't belong, and then only promote those guys who do belong. Now, of course, you run the risk in the AHL preseason of the same thing occurring, but there's no established stars that are going to be in harm's way. None of them are going to be looking down the barrel of a knee-on-knee collision because those players are not going to be there. Yeah. So I think it's a smart idea. I don't know the logistics of that and how that would affect the amount of time spent on preseason. I mean, for years, I've been thinking that the NHL has too many preseason games anyway.
The other thing you can do is you limit the roster number. You say, okay, when there's 1 week left in training camp, everybody has to be down to 30 players. That still gives you flexibility for camp battles, right? That's still 7 extra players.
Yeah.
But you can do that. Other stuff I've seen floated around is let teams dress more players during a game, which I have no idea why that shouldn't happen. These games mean nothing. Just we need to ease things out a little bit. I mean, the Canadiens are playing with 4 defensemen at one from basically the whole game yesterday on Saturday night.
Well, Kendata was sliding into the left D often just to give those other guys a break, which
right.
He actually did okay, you know. Props to him.
Yeah. So, it's tough. I think we can say like preseason and the NHL is broken. We often do commissioner for a day stuff, and most of our fixes are off the ice, because we always say the on ice product, it can be slow a little bit with the referees and dropping the puck. But for all intents and purposes, we have no notes when it comes to the on-ice product. The preseason is broken, and it needs to be fixed. Yep. Now, quickly, because we do want to get to other stuff, we want to get to happy stuff, but did you want to say anything about, I know you did, because it was part of your headline. It was not only the injuries, but it was the code. So please, tell me about Arbor Jacki.
So I'll keep it short. We've talked a while about this, and I do want to get into the happy. You're right, Jordan. There is some positives that we can talk about from this week. So Arbor Jacki, the very next time he was on the ice with Pare, he went after him. And it looked as though, and it's tough to see at that pace and when the camera's not fully on them, but it looked as though he went after him in the right way first. Pare declined, and therefore he went after him in the wrong way. And I am saying the right way and the wrong way, and I mean those words. You know, the right way is to go up to a guy and say, hey, that was not right. We're going to go. That's the code. The code in the NHL exists to compensate for when, like last night, 4 referees all miss the puck carrier getting knee on knee, which I don't even know how that occurs. How is that even possible?
It's so when you think about it.
If it happened behind the play, Jordan,
sure.
if Laine had been just skating up ice and wasn't looking and was knee on knee and, 40 feet away, yes, somebody else is carrying the puck, whatever, who cares? Hutson's carrying the puck beautifully and something happens. Okay, fair enough. You all missed it. Okay, you were looking at Hutson carrying the puck, but Laine was carrying the puck into the offensive zone. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. That was frustrating as hell. But basically all this to say that when that occurs, when the refs miss something, that's when the code comes into play. And that's when a player like Arbor Jacki, a player that I love, absolutely love, this whole fan base loves him because he does stuff like this. And now I do want to say, before even starting off, probably punching the guy in the back of the head was the wrong thing to do. In the moment, I'm shouting, I effing love Jacki so much. F yeah, Jacki, get him, because my anger is coming out. There were better ways to handle it, perhaps, but that is the code. And I think also, just to extend it to what we found out today, That's why the Department of Player Safety, who is comprised of a lot of ex-goons, just to put it frankly, they know the code, and therefore he was not suspended. He was only fined. And 9 times out of 10, when there's something passed down from the Department of Player Safety, I've called them the Department of Discipline in the past because I don't actually think they care about player safety, honestly. 9 times out of 10, they make bad decisions. Maybe that's too harsh. Maybe 7 times out of 10, they make bad decisions and under penalize players for dangerous predatory hits and things of that nature. In this case, this is one that benefits us, so perhaps it's biased, but I think that they got this one right. I think that they recognized that the referees didn't aptly do their jobs and that the code had to be respected, and that Pare, after doing something so brain dead and reckless, declined. And Pare is not a 5'9" player, by the way. He's about the same height as Arbor Jacki. So it's not like Jacki was going after a DeBrincat size player, even a Crosby size player who's like 3 inches shorter than him, which I even think that's still okay. He's the same size basically as Arbor Jacki. He should not have declined. He should have recognized the awfulness of that. And by the way, in the interview after, when that little smirk that he gets that everybody's talking about, if you don't know what Duper's Delight is, look it up. It's gross. It's the little smirk that you get when you're lying. When you're lying and you think that you're getting the upper hand on somebody's intelligence because you're duping them, it's called Duper's Delight. And I think that's exactly what it is. It looked like the smirk occurred right as he was saying that he had no bad intent and he wasn't trying to hurt and, all that stuff. That upset me as well to see him smiling after. No remorse.
I agree with what you said. How Jacki went after it the right way at the beginning. He got declined and then he went after it the wrong way. Yeah, that's the code. I usually find the code is kind of nauseating personally, as someone who's maybe identifies more as a hockey hipster than a hockey traditionalist. I kind of find the code dumb at times. But I think you're spot on when the Department of Player Safety does not suspend him, because if there is a penalty call there, I don't know what Jacki probably still goes after him, even if they make the penalty call. And I honestly, thinking about it on Saturday night, I thought it might just make sense to suspend Jacki for the rest of the preseason and the first regular season game, specifically because that first regular season game is against the Leafs. But it doesn't look like that's going to happen.
If I could just jump in on that point, because that's an interesting one. I was praying that wouldn't happen because the other 2 preseason games, Jacki out of the lineup, hey, fair game, open season. We can hit anybody. We can headshot Caulfield. We can knee-on-knee somebody because there's no repercussions. Jacki's not in the lineup. So that's the reason personally that I'm thrilled that Jacki did not get suspended for this, because he's still going to be there to defend his boys. And on a side note, Slavkovsky also throwing the mitts around. When a star like Slavkovsky, although he's big, that's not necessarily his place to do it. But you could see the anger built up in a lot of the Montreal Canadiens last night and just wanting to defend their teammates. So as far as a team environment catered to protecting one another, I think that's fantastic. I would urge them to be careful not to break their hands.
Yeah.
But I did like that Slavkovsky also is interested in protecting his teammates. Not that was ever in question.
You could actually see, I think, Slav, after he drops the gloves, he did the math in his head of I shouldn't be doing this. This is dumb.
Yeah, right.
Also, let's call it out, because we don't want to be homerists here. Don't pull hair. If you're going to fight, you can't be pulling someone's hair. So
for sure.
Not good, Slav. Also, just literally never get into a fight again, and we don't have to go give you these notes again, which I think everyone is kind of okay with. Also, shout out to Josh Anderson. Also dropped the gloves. He was, Andy's always there, right? He's still he has his moments, and he might be the guy on the second line going forward, and people are going to get upset about that. But Anderson he's still part of the team. So,
and I want to shout out Savard as well, because although he didn't drop the gloves, he was being mean all night to anybody and everybody, especially Pare. He was giving him some. So just a very collaborative effort to protect your teammates from the Canadiens last night in a night where they were minus several players.
Yeah. So that was a really long first headline. I will say we don't envision going this long on one headline for every episode, but this unfortunately might be the defining moment, at least of the early part of the season with the Montreal Canadiens. And it happens to be a bad one. So let's move on. Let's do at least one more headline, Brian. Let's flip the script a bit, because I did have a question for you of okay, well, what do you tell the fan base now? And I think that leads right into my first headline. And it's all about Laine. It's all about Laine Hutson. I mean, speaking of being targeted, my guy is already being targeted immediately. Max Domi with a nice, subtle, not subtle cross check that I think went right into Jakob Dobish was in nets on Thursday night. So everyone already knows Laine Hutson. He's going to get attacked. I really like the TSN crew's interpretation of Savard being Laine Hutson's defensive conscious when he's on the ice. I think these two together is kind of working well. Listen, Laine Hutson, so exciting right now. He is, I mean, he's dancing with the puck in the ways that we thought he could. There are moments, right, where you can see him, the vision, where he is 2 passes ahead of someone, where he's already going to a spot because he knows something's going to open up. You can see it. Now, what I want to say about Hutson, we have the rosiest colored glasses on with him right now because, my friend, he's making a lot of mistakes. Like so many defensive mistakes. Defensive mistakes that if that was PK Subban and not Laine Hutson and Michel Terrier and not Martin St. Louis, PK would be sleeping outside right now. That's like, there are some bad, I mean, he's not the only like rookie Laval defenseman. Like Engstrom obviously had some rough moments, but I think we have to couch it because there's a lot of good discussion about Laine and we're excited. Like there's one moment on Saturday night when it was the end of the power play and it's a bit of a sprawl and it's a mad dash. Laine pinches down from the middle of the blue line and he finds one of his teammates for a one-timer right away. Like there are moments where you're like, whoa, how did, like, he found the right time to pinch responsibly, did it right. And you're like, cool. And then there's other moments where he's trying to like backhand the puck as he's like deking around a guy in the defensive zone and it leads to a turnover and immediate scoring chance. He's played a ton of minutes in these last 2 games. I mean, the Saturday night, obviously it felt, I think, basically every defenseman played 27 to 30 minutes. And then on Thursday night, he played 26 against Toronto. So he's getting a lot of work right now. And I am parking the power play 1 discussion for a second. But what have you thought about Laine Hutson? It's mostly been like we're choosing to all be positive about it, understanding that there are warts, right?
Of course. I think it comes down to him recognizing when he's in the offensive zone versus when he's in the defensive zone. Because when he's in the O zone, I want him taking every risk and I want him doing crazy stuff. And we saw several occasions in every game, not just throughout the preseason, but in every game, several occasions where Hutson makes a pass so perfect and unexpected that a Montreal Canadiens star can't corral it because they weren't expecting. Like, how the heck did he get that puck to me? I think a lot of them are kicking themselves thinking that was a wide open net. I was on the side of the net and my stick wasn't on the ice because I could not fathom him possibly even getting the puck to me. So They have to be, whenever Hutson has the puck, be ready for a one-timer or to at least receive the pass crisp because he is an exceptional passer and he'll get the puck to you through a really quick move and then pass through the defender's legs, for instance. So, Slavkovsky, Caulfield, Doc, even Laine, Suzuki. I saw it happen to all of them this week. All of our best players.
You can keep going. You can go Newhook. You can go Anderson. Like there's specific passes he's made on the power play too, where you're like, he is going to, within 2 weeks, everyone's going to be like, oh, Laine's on the ice. And they just put the stick down. Yeah. And that's just it from now on. Like you understand Laine has the puck and you're kind of close to the net. Just put your stick on the ice to be safe.
Yeah. 100%. So again, it's that idea of defensive zone versus offensive zone, because that's all great, right? That's all fantastic in the offensive zone. We love that. We want to see more of that. In the D zone, we don't want to see you do too many dipsy doodles. Maybe to beat the first forechecker, totally fine. Everybody does that. We've seen Matheson do that with relatively good success most of the time. And we want to see Laine do that as well, because that gives you a numbers advantage. Not an odd man rush necessarily, but come down the ice 5-on-4 now because you beat the first forechecker. That's great. To try then and deke the second and third guys and then put a backhand out, as you said, probably the wrong thing to do. Find an outlet, do something, take the Reinbacher route. That's the way that I would say it, because Reinbacher showed how well he headmans the puck from the defensive zone. He's already a breakout aficionado, let's say, and Hutson can learn a lot from him. I think he can learn from Matheson. I think he can learn from Savard on just simplifying the play. Don't try and do too much in the defensive zone. Once you reach the neutral zone and especially the offensive zone, go nuts, buddy. You're awesome and we want to see it.
I just want to do one last thing on like the Hutson play before we do the power play stuff, because that's going to become, it's already the most nauseating conversation. And, I mean, whatever happened Saturday night, I guess trumps it by a bit, but The other thing I've noticed with Hutson, and I am like every shift, I'm now trying to understand it, is he's holding on to the puck a lot. Like, and there's like many reasons this could be happening, right? The Occam's razor, the simplest explanation is, well, he's a puck hog. I really don't think that's it. Like, I think other theories, and I think it might be a blend of them all. One is that the speed is much faster all of a sudden, and he's not seeing the right seams anymore. So he's holding on to it to almost like find the same size gap and not necessarily adjust. Like, it's just going to have to be a crisper pass because those gaps in play are not going to be the same in the NCAA as they are in the NHL. That one, I kind of believe. Then there's the fact that maybe he's just a little not trigger shy, where he's like, I don't know if I can shoot yet. Like, that's Nick Suzuki. That's Kirby Doc. Like, these are the captain and the assistant captains and like the second line center. Like, these are the important, I got to make sure I find the right spot for them. Like, I feel like that might be the leading candidate. What have you seen from, like, because he holds onto the puck a lot. Sometimes it does end up in those defensive zone turnovers. Sometimes he just kind of runs out of room in the offensive zone and just, we lose the puck and it's an odd man rush the other way. What have you seen with his like puck carrying decision making?
I think you're right that it's a combination of a few things. I don't think he's just a puck hog at all. And the idea that he's looking for the same seams that he was used to seeing, I think is a smart one. I think it's probably a lot of that, because you're right that the seams, not only in terms of space, but in terms of time, are lessened. So I think he just does not want to make a mistake to the point where he'd rather hold the puck because he knows they still have possession than risk a bad pass or risk a shot that's not going to go through. I will say, though, every shot he took, every attempt, either went on the goalie or somebody tipped it.
Yeah.
So that was a positive sign that, yes, he held on to the puck for a while, but once he decided to do something with it, most of the time it was either the right thing to do or even the best thing. Like when you're playing, I don't know if you play or watch chess at all, Jordan, but when somebody makes a move that is a brilliant move in one of the chess databases, it's a move that most people don't see because it could be 2-3 moves ahead that it actually impacts. And I think that that's what Laine Hutson is doing a lot. He's a chess master from the quarterback position on the power play, and even just at 5-on-5, because he moves so well, he can get past the oncoming two players and set somebody up really well. So I think he's waiting for opportunities to not make a mistake. He's looking for the best possible play too. He wants to make a big impact every shift. He wants to assist or score a goal on every single shift. So he's looking for the perfect play as well. And he's finding it a lot of the time. So you're right. It's a bunch of things. I want to talk about the power plays now.
Let's do it.
Because when you've had that much power play time in a game, and I correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was 7 opportunities and 4 shots on net.
Yep.
When that's the ratio, there's something wrong. And part of what was wrong was the energy was sucked out of the Montreal Canadiens because of 2 key players going down with injuries. And it's as simple as this. You just don't play the same way when that occurs. The wind goes out of your sails. Let's put that aside because the power play has been crap the entire preseason. So the 3 games prior, it was crap as well. And I don't want to hang all of this on Matheson, but when you go from the first power play unit to the second unit and generate more interesting chances on the second unit where all 4 of your forwards are not your primary power play guys, with the exception of Laine, I think the distributor, the quarterback, is the guy that you should look at and say, either change things up or we'll change up who's there. And I think that at this point, they probably just don't want to give Laine Hutson more than he can chew. They don't want to take away one of the main responsibilities of Matheson either, who's a veteran from Montreal, who's given his heart and soul to this team the entire time he's been here, and actually at times looked good on the power play, especially in rushes. He's more of a rush defenseman when it comes to offense. But I think the writing's on the wall here that already at this very young age as a rookie, Laine Hutson is a far better power play quarterback than Mike Matheson is.
I think this will be, not to cut you off there, but I think this will be legitimately the first difficult decision, like in the room, how do guys respond to it, decision from Martin St. Louis in his tenure. Because it's an assistant captain, it's your best defenseman. He got 60 points last year. And like, I'm happy the way you phrased it is it's not just a Matheson issue.
No.
Right?
He's
not the reason they're 26 and you put Laine out there and they're going to be 3rd in the NHL.
Correct.
But like, I think he's a fine distributor. It's just that you need a bit more creativity in there. it's not that Matheson's a negative. It's just that it looks like Hutson's going to be a big, like a plus when it comes to it. But again, it's not necessarily the optics, but and there is a universe where this works out really well, where you demote Matheson to power play 2, but that also means that Matheson's not at 26 minutes a night anymore.
Yeah.
And maybe he's just a bit more fresh at 23 minutes.
Yeah.
But you have to be careful with how you deal with Hutson's ice time at that point. You can't have him at 22, 23 minutes in his rookie year. Like, you know, you're going to have to kind of figure out how to pace out his timing. But I really do think like and Matheson might just be a pro about it.
I assume he would be. He's shown nothing but professionalism. Yeah.
Exactly. Like St. Louis gets him in, you know, whether it's mid-October, whether it's mid-November, whether it's next week, and says, we're going to try Laine on the first wave. Like,
I don't even think you know what? He would call him into his office and go, I think you know. I think you know, buddy.
Right,
I'm sorry,
yeah.
but look at him. You've seen him.
Yeah.
Isn't he the best distributor you've ever seen since you've been playing in the league? Like, you played with Letang a while. Shades of Letang here. You know, are you seeing this?
Yeah, it's tough, man, because like at the end of the day, Matheson has 2 years left on that deal, and he's gonna want to re-sign for a lot of money or just sign a new contract. And taking someone off the first wave of the power play, he won't get the 60 points again on power play 2.
No, definitely
right?
not.
So
Definitely
like there's
not.
a lot of like, and some people might be like scoffing at this notion of like politicking and making sure that like the egos are massaged. Like, no, I think it's really like Mike Matheson is one of the 5 most important players on the Habs right now. So you have to be careful for a variety of reasons, right? You've said it. Like, there's workhorse, top defenseman. He is a local boy, assistant captain. Like, this is a really like important player. So like, and you're going to bump him for a guy who's not played in the NHL. I know he played like 2 games last year, but let's be real. Like, Lane Hutson's a very green rookie right now. So it's going to happen. I'm convinced it's going to happen. I think everyone's convinced it's going to happen. It's like when Anderson was on the first wave of the power play and we're saying, when are we getting Slav?
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be as long and drawn out, but you saw how St. Louis dealt with that, where it was very slow and protracted. And they might just want to say like, look, we're not going to force Laine to play 22 minutes a night in his first season. He's going to play 18, 19, and he's going to be power play 2, and we're all going to be okay with it. And maybe by March we change our minds. But that might be the right play for Hutson. Otherwise, Hutson might be burnt out in mid-January, and the second half of his season could be completely torpedoed.
I mean, I'd be happy. I think I'd be happier. I know that last week I had said that I wanted him on the second pairing to get as much ice time as possible. That was sort of when I was under the assumption that Matheson just owns the first power play spot, so Hutson wouldn't have it. I think I would rather Hutson ease into the NHL by being the third pairing guy, but get power play 1, rather than second pairing with power play 2. Because you're playing to his strengths. You're telling him, look, we know that you can do this already. You're giving him that vote of confidence. It's the difference. You know what? I want to summarize it like this. The difference between the two players is it's reacting versus creating.
Yes.
Matheson can absolutely react in a moment to, a seam just opened. I can get that puck there. But Lane Hutson will open the seam with a move. And Matheson doesn't do that. He'll do it occasionally, but that's Hudson's whole bread and butter. And I will say that extends to Suzuki and Caulfield, and that extends to Doc, and that extends to Slavkovsky. None of them were opening up seams the way that you'd like to see, the way that Lane Hutson was on the second unit. And so I think that Hutson being put in there could absolutely start opening up seams himself, and maybe even teach those other guys how to do it too, and give them just a little bit more time with the puck. Maybe that's too much time now spent on the power play that has just sucked so far, and it's depressing. And maybe they'll figure it out against Ottawa. But are you ready to move on? Should we jump to the next topic, Jordan?
Yeah, I think so. Let's jump quickly to our third and final headline before heading into part 2 of the episode.
So let's rush this one because we've gone way long on these topics so far. The next headline is pressure at every position. In fact, when preparing for this episode, we both created a headline that the content is essentially the same. Mine was pressure at every position. Jordan's was young, dumb, and fun. I think I like yours better, actually, Jordan. It's a funnier headline and more catchy. But basically, what we're saying is there's a lot of pressure on some of these veterans. So bubble guys, forwards, Anderson, Dvorak, Evans, Armia, Pizzetta. Those last 3, not so much, but definitely Anderson and Dvorak, hearing footsteps. The guys who are on their tails, Kapanen has looked fantastic. Heineman, I would say, even made a little bit of a jump, a guy that we hadn't necessarily written off last year, but said he's not yet ready yet, and he might not be. anytime soon. Barré-Boulet I liked a lot, and Owen Beck, who has been sent down at this point. But I think Beck could be on their tails at some point this season once he gets used to the speed and the AHL game a little bit more. On defense, Barron and Struble are hearing footsteps from Reinbacher, from Hutson, from Trudeau, and then Logan Mailloux, of course. And then even in net, where we spent about 6 seconds last week talking about, I don't remember what the quote was, but we said basically, oh, Jordan, we forgot about the goalies. Is it going to be Monty Primo? Yeah, it's Monty Primo. Don't forget about Jakub Dobeš, because he has looked fantastic. Primo might be hearing footsteps at this point. I think that the fact that Primo played so well last year and just didn't get enough of a slice of the pie in terms of games played, he'll get much more this year. But Dobeš has looked fantastic. His numbers in the AHL last year were great with the Rocket. So we're in a situation of a lot of wealth in terms of depth of this organization right now, more so than we've had in years. And that's a very exciting thing. Do you have any guys to add to either the ones hearing footsteps, the ones making loud footsteps?
No other names, just quickly on a few. Dobeš is going to be the reason the Rocket make the playoffs. I think, like, my headline of young, dumb, and fun, like, that's going to be the Rocket season, because you're going to make a crap load of mistakes, but I think they're going to be really fun to watch. And like, they're going to be have young legs. Like, it's going to be a young team that gets embarrassed a few nights, but I think Dobeš being back there will kind of help stabilize them a little bit. I do want to see, like, a subplot for the Rocket is I want a clear number 3 forward prospect to take a step forward in Laval. We know who number 1 is. He's out in Russia getting benched in the third period because his coach doesn't like him. Number 2 is likely Michael Hage, if we're okay keeping it. I think we're all okay with that right now, and hopefully he does a nice season in the NCAA. Who's number 3? Let's have a clear guy between Beck, between Kidney, between Farrell, between whoever. But the name you mentioned at the top, and now because of the unfortunate Laine situation, is Kapanen going to make the team? Because recall, he has, as far as we understand, a clause in his European contract that basically says if he's not on the Habs, he has to go back to Europe. So there's an open roster spot now. That was one of my notes before Saturday of, like, we know the team, right? But assuming, Laine is out. We don't know 4 months, 6 months, 2 months, 1 month, a year, who knows? But he's out, meaning there's a roster spot open. And is it Kapanen who's going to fill that, or are they just going to make a more long-term play and instead tell someone like Emil Heineman, like, you're on the team opening night and we'll figure it out? That's some stuff to figure out in week 2 of training camp. It's not ultimately too important, but I do think the Rocket season coming forward, like, they'll be there, they'll be getting ready, but not quite enough, I think, to really burn some fire under the bottom 6 forwards or some of the other defensemen. Also, you put Hutson in there. Hudson's 100% on the team, right? It's not even a question anymore.
He is. It was more just guys who haven't played in the show yet, or played 2 games. Those are the guys who are making the footsteps. But yeah, maybe I misspoke, because Hutson is absolutely on the team. The cuts that have been made, the players that he's been playing with, and just the level of play in general, it's clear he'll be there. So I would be astounded if he didn't start.
Yeah,
at least point, on the third pairing, like not in the press box even.
Yeah, at this point he is the second pairing with David Savard, and that's basically locked in. So
yeah, let's
end part 1 there. It was a long part 1. Again, hopefully not that long every episode, but hey, rough week. Part 2. Let's do a hot take meter, Brian. I'll be honest, I had some fun hot takes about the second line that had to be thrown in the garbage this morning because I'm very sad. So that's unfortunate. So it might be a bit shorter of a segment because I kind of had to scramble and come up with a few new ones. But I did have one that was not affected by the tragedies of Saturday night. And I'll do it like this, Brian. Let's see if I can have you fall into my trap. Based on age, based on contract, who do you think is the most likely player to be traded on the Montreal Canadiens this year? Based on their age and how that compares to the rest of the age curve of the team, based on maybe the fact that they might be an expiring contract and the fact that they might have some value.
Yeah.
Who would it be?
I think I'm leaning Armia.
Okay.
I think I'm leading Armia because he had such a good season last year, and his blend of defensive acumen, penalty killing ability, some power play, secondary power play ability, kind of, and his ability to forecheck, his size, all these things, and puck protection in the offensive zone. I think all these things culminate in just a pretty reliable third or fourth line forward.
And then what about on the defensive end?
I don't think There is one, and that's what's crazy is that I think it might be Struble as similar to a Harris move.
Right. Okay.
Because I don't think Matheson is the guy you move at least yet until Gooley and Hutson are both ready for a top 4 spot all the time. And I don't think you move a right-handed guy like Savard. So I'm dying to know who you're getting at here.
Yeah, so I was hoping you would fall into it with Savard, since he's in his mid-30s. He's 10 years older than basically anyone on the team. He's an expiring contract. I was hoping you were going to say David Savard. My hot take is that the Canadiens are actually going to sign Savard to a 1-year extension in the season, rather than trading him, which I think would buck what the fan base is thinking, as him as one of the most likely to be traded based on the fact that he has actual value. Honestly, like, I don't know. Christian Dvorak probably doesn't have value. Evans, but probably really not. Armia, probably, he would have to show it again one more year. I think David Savard, a Stanley Cup winning defenseman on an okay contract, expiring if he's healthy, likely would get you the most from the expiring contracts. I think my take is he'll sign an extension in the season, a 1-year extension to stick around. So I didn't even actually explain the hot take meter properly. So what happens is we each have our own takes. The other, I'll present it, or Brian will present it to me. And the receiving person has to grade it 1 out of 10. 1 being lukewarm at best, and that is something along the lines of Uri Slavkovsky makes the Habs this year, despite the fact that he's waiver exempt. And a 10 out of 10 would be something along the lines of the Ottawa Senators making the playoffs. No, I'm kidding. That would probably be like a 6.5, right? 6 maybe. A 10 out of 10 is something like there's mid-season expansion to a hockey team in Brazil, and that team wins the cup. That's a 10.
Right.
So where does Savard signing a contract extension in the season, where does that grade to you, 1 to 10?
Prior to the Reinbacher injury, this would have been hotter.
Yeah.
Not to bring it back to that and get depressed all over again, but it would have been hotter. It might have been a 7-8. I think it's more of a 6 now.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I think it's a 6. I think that if Barron had made a bigger leap, and I'm not saying he didn't make a leap because he's looked quite good actually in training camp and preseason. There's a lot of moving parts here, so it's difficult to say, but I think it's a 6. And Reinbacher was really the guy that was going to put pressure on that right-hand side. I think Mayu's putting pressure, but not in the top 4 yet.
Yeah.
I think that's another guy that's just making too many mistakes so far.
Absolutely. I do think, I thought this take was not affected by Saturday night, but it was. I spaced out on the Reinbacher part. I think, yeah. I was thinking he's clearly a good partner, a good like steward for the young guys. We saw it 2 years ago with Gooley. We're going to see it this year with Hutson. I figured at this point, like, just to hedge a little bit on the right-handed defenseman, he clearly wants to be in Quebec. He wants to play, for the Montreal Canadiens. I could see kind of a nice middle ground being struck where they say, here's 1 more year, 3.5, keep the same AAV. We want to keep you around.
So actually, I'm going to jump in here. It might actually be a 7 because I think he'd want 2 years. Regardless of the price tag, because he would get 2 years elsewhere. There's no doubt in my mind he would get 2. Some team might even give him 3. Maybe a little bit less money, but like instead of 1 at 3.5, he might accept 3 at 2.7.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Make more money overall. Yeah. I was of the opinion that, like, you know what? I think I'm ready to see him go. I think this young core is ready to move up. We need some new youth, but Savard is important to this team the way that most Habs fans don't realize. He's so much more than what you see, because often what you see is only the surface, because a good defensive defenseman you don't notice.
I in part created this one post Drew Doughty injury because I was kind of interested or surprised that there wasn't much Savard smoke at all. Like a 1-year rental for Savard to kind of fill the gap while Drew Doughty's down and go on from there. Anyways, let's move on. What's your first take?
So I want to talk about a guy that you mentioned. Demidov will win the Calder next season.
Wow, we're taking our shot right now. It is September 29th, 2024, and you just can't seem to wait a year to make this claim.
Well, I'll tell you why, Jordan, because I, like you, had a Laine. I actually had 2 hot takes that involved Laine out of excitement for him that I've had for a couple days now. One, it was in tandem with other guys, so I just altered it. I put somebody else in there. I'll get to that one after. But the first one was just about Laine. And so I figured, let's talk about another guy who we've all been extremely excited about. And then I didn't watch the game itself, the KHL game that occurred just a mere couple hours ago, but I was seeing some highlights, and to see him being slighted by his coach like that made me feel, you know what, I want to shine a huge spotlight on our boy Demidov, because he's not going to get done like that in Montreal. And I think that he has a chance to win the Calder next season. He's been very, very, very good in the KHL. He makes one bad little mistake leaving his stick there too long. A guy trips on it, and suddenly he only gets 1 minute in the third period. Frustrating as all hell, but again, that will not happen to you in Montreal, buddy. You're going to be given a longer leash. So how hot is this take? Calder next season? You got to include the other guys who are going to be up for it.
So that's what I'm trying to think about right now. The upcoming draft class, there's Hagens, there's Malone, there's Misa. I don't know if any of those guys, whoever the first few picks are, go straight to the league if they have a better odds than Demidov. Then there's players from this past draft, from Demidov's draft, that might be rookies in that year. So it could be Seneca. You might be ready to look at Lev Shunov. Trying to think who else. And then at that point, the 2022 draft, now you're thinking of guys who would be in their third post-draft season. There's a real chance where, especially with the fact that Michkov is a rookie now and not waiting one more year, that would have been a really fun storyline to have a Michkov versus Demidov Calder
race.
I think he'd be the favorite. And again, I'm probably spacing out on names, and it's a whole year away, so you get an extra, bump a point or a point and a half on that. I'll give you like a 5. I think it's right in the middle spot where I think it's kind of
to win the Calder.
Well, because I think he'd be the favorite regardless. I'm giving you so it's a little lower, and I bump it up a bit because you're calling your shot 18 months in advance. So I'll bump you from a 4 to a 5 on that, maybe 5.5. I'll give you that point and a half.
Okay. Well, when I thought of this one, I was like, oh, Jordan's going to give this an 8, but I'd prefer you give it a 5 or a 5.5, because that means that.
Well, he just looks so good. He's looked so good in the KHL, and he will. I don't know if they'll lay off him eventually, but I would presume at one point he's going to get more ice time and play 15, 16 minutes a night. So I think there'll be some positives there.
He has to get more ice time, man. He has to get bumped up. He's more than clearly the best player on his team most nights, and sometimes the best player on the ice for either team. So it's just a matter of time before they start throwing the kid a bone. That's what I think.
Okay. Hot take number 2, Cole Caulfield will lead the team in assists this year.
Whoa. Okay, so who could battle him for that? Suzuki, obviously. Matheson, if he's still on PP1. Hutson, if he's on PP1.
Yep.
Slavkovsky's playmaking, I think, is underrated. Doc's playmaking is underrated, but now that Laine's down, he has less options to pass to. Newhook, Roy, Anderson, all those guys are not in contention. This is a spicy one, Jordan, because there's about 4 or 5 guys who are near, at, or above Caulfield's level in terms of a playmaker. So, yeah, I'm going to go 8.
Yeah.
I'm going to go 8. This is a pretty hot take, man.
You know what? It started off with me being like Suzuki getting to 40 goals because I find that him and Slav have such a good chemistry. And I'm like, well, Caulfield's still there. He's still around. And Slavkovsky's going to score more than 20 this year. So you start doing the math of how many assists are going to be flying around. And then the hedge I made was, there's going to be a power play 1 quarterback switch at some point that's going to reduce both of their assist totals. Like if you have Lane Hutson or Mike Matheson there the whole season, then that might be your front runner. But if it's split after 30 games and then Hutson becomes the number 1 guy in December, I mean, who knows? It could be by opening night. I was just trying to so there is it's a very small alley, but there's an alley there. There's an avenue where Caulfield's just scoring, that Suzuki's just scoring goals and Slavkovsky's just scoring goals, and suddenly Cole Caulfield's sitting there with 53 assists at the end of the year. He had 37 last year. He was 14 behind Nick Suzuki. I think he was 3rd on the team. He was 7 behind
Nick Suzuki, actually. Slavkovsky was 14 behind Suzuki.
Okay.
I just pulled it up because I wanted to see just how close he was. Yeah, 37 assists. Suzuki had 44.
What was Matheson at?
Matheson 51.
Okay, so that was 14 behind Matheson.
He was 14 behind Matheson.
Yes.
That's what it was. Okay.
It's there. I think this is a good take. Not to, pat myself on the back, because that's the point, that's a good hot take, right? If there's a slimmer of hope and you can just extrapolate it and stretch it out. So Caulfield leads the team in assists this year. What's your second hot take?
Yeah, it's not like you said Caulfield 50 goals, 90 assists. What's the take? That's a 10. Mine is about goals. I said it before that Laine was originally in it. I replaced Laine with Doc. I think last year Yeah, last year at the beginning of the season, I gave you either a hot take or a over under or something like that. That was Suzuki, Slavkovsky, Caulfield, and Doc. 100 goals among the four of them. I want to repeat it, but I'm going to jump to 120 because last season Nick Suzuki had 33, Caulfield had 28, Slavkovsky had 20. That gets us to 81 goals. Doc, had he not been injured, probably pots 19. I would not be surprised if he had potted 19 goals or at least close to that. So they would have made it close. 1 year later, one more year of chemistry. The full season together, not just half the season like last year for Suzuki, Caulfield, Slav. And Doc now kind of being the primary scorer of his line, unfortunately.
Yeah. See, this is also mucked around by the Laine injury too.
Of course.
And that's like, I had a take, I've removed it, but I had all players on the second line score 25 plus goals. But I couldn't even keep that in any capacity because I don't know what the second line will be. And if past this prologue with St. Louis, he's going to try something that's not going to work for 10, 12 games before finding the right recipe, which is fine. Like, you don't have to hit it right on the nose right away. But my presumption is going to be, it's going to be Armia or Anderson that takes that spot, when maybe it should be Josh Roy.
Yeah, I hope it's Roy, but he might just give it to a vet. Crossing my fingers for Roy. So what's the number here?
Right. So 120 between so that's all of them have to be healthy, and they're not all getting 30. Right. So someone has to get close to 40. We've been telling Cole Caulfield is the most famous 40 goal scorer to never score 30 goals. That's already, like, I'll be honest, a pretty sick burn that goes around anytime Montreal Canadiens fans talk about Cole Caulfield. I respect it. He's going to have to crack like 30, 35. So, like, yeah, you know what? That's a good one. It's like 10% higher than it should be. Like, I feel like 95 to 100 should be a given, even if they're all miss a bit of time. So I'll put it at a 6 and a quarter. How about that? 6.25.
So yeah, that's fine. Hey, that means that there's more than a sliver of hope.
Yeah.
I think the last one being an 8, there was basically just a little sliver. This one, there's more hope there. I think you're right. I think Suzuki scoring 33 last year has a chance at more. Cole Caulfield 28 last year has a chance at more. Slavkovsky with 20 definitely has a chance at much more. I think the wild card here is Doc. If Doc can get to 22, 25, they could probably do it. And they all have to stay healthy. That's the other thing.
I'm going to feel a lot more comfortable talking about Doc in a week because A, the preseason will be over, and B, I'll know who his line mates are going to be.
Yeah, of course.
Beyond,
if he gets put with Anderson, that's probably 5 to 10 less goals for Doc, honestly. Yeah,
because that's the thing. Like, beyond the unfortunate nature and sad nature of what's happened to the team, and maybe we can probably start closing the episode on this. Like it's a real bummer what's happened to Laine and Reinbacher, but lost in the entire shuffle. I would argue Reinbacher's lost in the shuffle because it's Laine's the big loss here. It's Kirby Doc. It's like, what the hell happened to that second line now that we had thought we had figured out? And I'm going to feel a lot more comfortable talking about that next week when we have an extra 6-7 days of information and a couple more games to understand better. Oh, this is what the second line is going to now look like.
I have a question for you that we could just sort of throw in here at the end. Does Hughes make a Bergevin-like panic move to add somebody to the top 6? Because I'm seeing it everywhere. And initially when I saw the question, it pissed me off because I thought, we're getting away from the real issue. That's, Laine's down and we feel for him. But I want to address it because everybody's talking about it.
I'll say this, and this is not going to affect next week's predictions. The Habs over-under, we always do, like the Habs, we're going to do over-unders all second half of the next week's episode. We'll do our fun, stupid ones that we do together. And then we always do one together, and that is the Montreal Canadiens point total over-under. 2 years ago, it was 71.5. We both laughed at it and be like, what the hell? Why is this so high? We hit the under. It was under. Good for us. Last year, for some reason, the team got better. They kept it at 71.5. We said, that's a joke. It's going to go over. It went over. This year, it had moved. It moved from up to 70. I think the highest I saw was 77.5. If you recall, in the offseason, I was saying, show me the defensive lineup on opening night, and I'll tell you how many points they have. And if it was Savard and Matheson there, I said, this is an 83, 84 point team. I said that before the Laine trade because we didn't pod after the Laine trade, right? With Laine, I never actually ended up saying this because we never got to it. But with Laine, I was probably going to say the team wasn't make the playoffs this year. I thought that was very much in the cards. Without Laine, I was convinced they're an 83, 84 point team. Add Laine, you're getting bumped to 90. The East, after the top 6, is going to be trash again this year, so you can squeeze into a wild card spot. The fact that the Laine stuff is, I still think they get better than they were last year. That's my point. So I don't think they need to make a trade. I think there's enough guys knocking on the door that you can open up a bit of a space for them. So I don't think you need to make a trade, because even without Laine, I thought this team was still going to get, 5 to 8 points better. Just with Laine, I thought it was going to be 14 to 20 points better. I thought they were going to take the big jump up to 90 points maybe. So to answer your question, like I don't think they're going to make any trade like that, but they're opportunists. They're going to see something, and if they see a move that makes sense for them, they're going to make it, but it's not going to be something for the short term. I know that. What do you think?
No, I agree with you. I think Bergevin would do something in a heartbeat. I think he already would have made his move, clown that he was. I don't think Hughes is like that. I think that you're absolutely right. He'll give a spot to one of the young kids. They're still going to be better. I'm more bearish than you are. I think you're more bullish than me when it comes to their point total without Laine, and with him, they may have made a push for a wild card. I was still under the impression they'd be a bubble team at best, but it's good to have conflict between you and I, looking ahead to the season, and one of us is going to be right, but
it'll be me. That's okay.
It'll be you. Who knows? Maybe they'll lead the Atlantic.
But the Sens are in our division.
Oh, that's true. The Sens have already won the cup, basically, if you look at Sens Twitter.
This is the year.
Oh, man. Yeah, this is their year. Toronto, too, by the way.
Okay.
Jesus Christ. Okay. Yeah, I don't see it. I hope not, certainly, because a panic move would be the wrong thing right now. You're absolutely right. He's an opportunist. If an opportunity comes, that's great. I hope he jumps on it. But nobody's going to go, hey, I saw you lost Laine. That's really tough. Here, have our future top 6 forward for a bag of pucks and some peanuts. Just have him.
Yeah.
So when we talk opportunism, it's going to be more like one of the left-handed defenseman prospects plus for maybe a top 6 guy. But, let's maybe that's too much time spent on a hypothetical that probably will not occur.
Yeah, that's all right. I think it's good to talk it through just a little bit there. Okay, I think that'll do it for this week's episode. As we kind of started getting into it there, we'll do our proper predictions for the team next week, and it does sound like there might be some disagreements there, so I'll just have to convince Brian that he's been wrong all these years. But for now, that'll do it for this week's episode of This Week in Habsland. We'll be back next week to wrap up the preseason, thankfully, and complete our regular season preview. You can follow us on social media at HabslandPod. And if you like what you heard, feel free to leave a 5-star rating on Spotify and Apple Podcast. Until next Monday, go Habs.